Pull me under, the last stand of Valor's keep. The wind howled like a wounded beast through the battlements of Valor's keep, carrying with it the scent of rain and blood. I gripped the hilt of my sword tightly, its pommel slick with sweat. Below, the plain stretched like an ocean of writhing chaos, the enemy advancing in waves, a tide of steel and shadow. The clouds above swirled ominously, as though the heavens themselves recoiled from the carnage to come. For centuries, my family had stood as guardians of this land, bound by duty, by honor. Yet I stood here alone, the last of my line, with nothing left to defend but the crumbling stones beneath my feet and the tattered banner that flapped wildly in the gale. It bore the sigil of a golden phoenix rising from the ashes, a bitter symbol now. Dust coated the once bright insignia, the proud emblem reduced to a relic of a world that had long since forgotten its meaning. The drums began, their rhythm pounding like a heartbeat. I felt the weight of centuries upon me, of those who came before, who stood on these same walls and faced their own doom. The thought should have steeled me, but instead, I was afraid. Afraid of what lay beyond the veil, beyond the spinning wheel of life and death. "Pull me under," I muttered, my voice drowned by the din of the storm. It was not a prayer, not truly. It was an invitation to the abyss, a resigned acceptance of what could not be outrun. A cry rose from the enemy ranks, a sound that clawed at the edges of my mind, feral and unnatural. They surged forward, arrows arcing through the sky like black rain. I ducked behind the parapet, feeling the sharp sting of splinters as one shaft struck the stone near my head. The arrows fell in a relentless hail, embedding themselves in the timbers and earth. One found flesh. The man beside me collapsed silently, his eyes wide in shock as blood pooled beneath him. I reached for his hand, but he was already gone. The assault came in waves. Their battering rams struck the gates with a sickening rhythm, and the wood groaned under the strain. My men, those who still stood, fought valiantly, their blades flashing like lightning in the storm's dark heart. Yet we were few, and they were legion. For every enemy that fell, 3 more took their place, faceless beneath their iron masks. I fought on, each swing of my sword an act of defiance. I lost myself in the rhythm of the battle, a spinning vortex of chaos and blood. Time became meaningless. Seconds stretched into hours, hours into lifetimes. The only constant was the weight of my blade and the roar of my own breath. And then, silence. The enemy had withdrawn, leaving their dead piled at the gates. My legs trembled, and I leaned against the wall for support, staring out at the carnage. The field was a sea of bodies, their forms half hidden by the shifting mists. Yet the respite brought no relief. This was but a prelude. I knew they would return, stronger and more determined. A voice cut through the stillness, low and melodic. "You fight well, but what do you fight for?" I turned sharply, my sword raised. The figure before me was shrouded in a cloak as dark as the storm clouds above, their face hidden beneath a hood. Their presence was unnerving, like a shadow given form. "I fight for honor," I spat, though the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. "For my people, for what remains." The figure chuckled, a sound devoid of warmth. "Honor is a brittle shield. It will not save you." "Who are you?" I demanded, though a part of me feared the answer. "I am the end," they replied simply. "The arrow that finds its mark, the dust that settles after the storm. You called to me, did you not? Pull me under, you said." The realization struck me like a blade. This was no mortal before me. This was death itself, come to collect its due. "I will not yield," I said, though my voice wavered. Death tilted its head as if amused. "None ever do, but the wheel spins, and all must fall beneath its turning." The gates shuddered behind me, the enemy's assault renewed. I turned instinctively, ready to face them once more, but the figure's voice stopped me. "This battle is lost," they said. "You know this. Yet you stand even now, clinging to the frayed threads of a world that no longer remembers you. Why?" The question pierced me deeper than any blade. I looked out over the walls, at the blood-soaked ground, at the faces of those who had fallen. My brothers, my friends. The weight of their sacrifice crushed me, and yet I stood. Why? For them, I whispered, because they stood for me. Death said nothing, but I felt their gaze, heavy and unyielding. The gates gave way with a thunderous crash and the enemy poured through like a tide. I raised my sword, knowing it was futile, knowing I would fall. And yet I charged, meeting them head-on, a single flicker of light against the darkness. The clash was deafening. Blades met shields, and bodies collided in a frenzied dance. I lost count of how many I struck down, how many wounds I sustained. Blood ran in rivers pooling at my feet. I was drowning in it, the air thick with the metallic tang. And then, the end. It came not with a roar but with a whisper. A single arrow, loosed from the shadows, found its mark. I stumbled, the world tilting as the spinning wheel ground to a halt. My sword fell from my hand, clattering uselessly to the stones. I sank to my knees, the sounds of battle fading to a distant hum. The storm above seemed to still, the clouds parting just enough to reveal a sliver of light. I reached for it, my fingers brushing the air. "Pull me under," I whispered once more, the words barely audible. And then, nothing. A sudden, abrupt silence. The world moved on,